Good evening, and it is, of course, Monday evening. That means it's time for the Monday Night Euro review show from the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory. I'm joined by my very good friend Adam, and for the first time, we have a special guest who is a Spurs fan. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Ben. Unfortunately, Spurs fan for my sins, especially after the result of the weekend. But it's really good to be on here with you guys. Really good to be chatting for everything.
Well, thanks for coming on, man. I'm especially excited to talk about Spurs this weekend, but I promise not to be too smug about it, or I'll try anyway, right? Adam, how we doing, man?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Having to contend with some Stevenage fans trolls this weekend, but apart from that, it was a nice kind of little pleasure over the weekend seeing my little boy make it obvious that he scored a hat-trick in front of all the parents, and I had to remind him he has to make sure he handshakes his opponents. But apart from that, all good. How was your weekend, mate?
Yeah, not bad at all. The Alex and Arsenal won. That doesn't happen often. The Alex beating second in the league, so we're now up to third. Looks like promotion could be a thing this season, which is pretty exciting. And Arsenal, it was quite routine. I don't think we're really going to talk about it today. But Zinchenko scored an absolute Karate Kid-esque finish, which was absolutely beautiful to see. So yeah, not bad. Ben, decent weekend, or would you rather not talk about it?
You know what? It's me and my mates always say, because I went to the game on Saturday, and we always say that whenever we go away, the day out is better than the result anyway. And that definitely was the case this weekend. The thing is, the result, I mean, we'll get onto it in a bit more detail anyway. The result to me wasn't really the end of the world. It was more just some of the concerns around the performance. But I think in terms of the overall weekend, I mean, we kind of were all treated to that Premier League classic on Sunday. And it made me, I was thinking when I was watching the intro, I loved that. It reminded me of watching Premier League years as a kid. Some of those shots, I was just like, I love that. And it felt like that Man City-Chelsea game kind of fell into that very nicely. And I think, we'll talk about it later, but that was an absolute classic. So that was a nice way to kind of round off the weekend. But yeah, Saturday wasn't our best day, but I'm sure
we move on. Well,
exactly.
To be honest, having done like traveling away when I lived in the UK and stuff, I find like the football is almost incidental to it, really. If you know what I mean, like it is more just about having a few drinks and seeing a new place, really. Even if it is Wolverhampton, it's still quite nice, right?
Yeah. 100%. And the only thing is, the most annoying thing about, I've done Wolves before, and it was a few years ago. We won 3-2 away, and we made hard work of that one. But the thing I find with Wolves is that, I'm sure you kind of comes across on telly, but that away end is so bad. It's like you get the whole of the side of the pitch, and it's just like you can't. Bear in mind, we went up in the first, when one up in like the first couple of minutes, trying to kind of generate an atmosphere, really get behind the team. Like we were like playing quite good football for like the first 5 minutes, but you can't really get anything going because it's so, you basically just get if you had an end, it feels different in some way, but where you're on the side of the pitch and you're kind of a little bit further away, and it's just like you've got 1/3 of the fans singing one song and it doesn't quite transfer to the next bit. Like I was kind of in the middle, and it's just like all a bit disjointed. So it's just like Wolves isn't the best. And also, you probably saw it on telly as well. The sun was like, you just couldn't see anything. And that first half, like the sun was kind of, there's a corner at Molineux, which is like a temporary stand now, where they've got like quite a decent amount of fans, but there's no roof there. It's like a temporary bit. So if it rains, like you're fucked basically. I don't know how you would cope with that. But where there's no roof there, like the sun was just beaming through that gap. So you just spent the whole of the game basically just like that, which, oh God, yeah, it was a miserable 90 odd minutes, but a good day nonetheless. I mean, yeah, spirits are still high, I'd say, going into the international break. We need it, I think, to be honest.
Well, yeah, I think it has come at the perfect time for you. So we'll just jump into it. But this show, we are of course going to be talking about Spurs. We're going to be talking about the classic that happened at the Bridge. Are Chelsea the most fun team in the league this year? We'll be talking about all the threes as Liverpool score 3, West Ham score 3, and Aston Villa score 3. And we will be talking, of course, about Dominic Solanke sinking Newcastle, which I did enjoy watching. Before, of course, going to Serie A, well, we'll be talking about how I managed to stay awake during the Derby della Capitale, Juve and Inter in the title race, and how Milan got very lucky to get out of a point from Puglia on their way up back to Milan. But let's go into the Premier League and let's discuss Wolves leaving it last gasp to take the win. Now, Ben, of course, as you said, you were at the game. Spurs did start well, as you said, scoring within the first 2-3 minutes. Brennan getting his first goal for the club. Did you think from that point that you would make it comfortable, or have you been watching Spurs too long to feel like that?
Yeah, definitely the latter, to be honest. The thing is, I kind of felt confident going into the game despite all of the injuries. Wolves, to me, have been pretty impressive this season. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I anticipated a difficult game, but I still felt that we had enough to at least get something. And I think we started really, really encouragingly. Like the Johnson's goal. It was a brilliant goal. The kind of the ball, the pass accidentally kind of finds its way to Kulusevski. I think it was meant for Porro from Sarr, but it gets it to him nonetheless. It's a lovely back heel from Kulusevski. Porro, that typical kind of overlapping run when we get into those final third areas, and then he puts a brilliant ball in. And that's the thing with Brennan Johnson. I was so pleased for him last week to get the start against Chelsea, because he's had a couple of really like electrifying cameos off the bench, started in the North London derby, but it didn't quite work out for him. He pulled up with an injury, and I was just really excited to see him. And he was one of the players that we were going to have to kind of rely on in this period for a bit of a different dynamic in Spurs' attack without Maddison. So for him to kind of score so early on, and for it to be such a well-worked goal, I kind of thought, not that we were going to be in for a straightforward afternoon, but you just thought, we've had a lot go against us in the last week, and to kind of kick off the game like that and start really strongly, you just felt that the team were really at it. But after the goal, it was just, I think Brennan Johnson came out and talked about it today on international duty, and was just like, it just felt flat. We kind of just took our foot off the gas a little bit, really. And I think, to be honest, if we've seen Ange Postecoglou in a couple of the games so far this season, and even in pre-season friendlies, go absolutely mental at the team from the sides or in the dressing room at halftime because he's not happy with the standards that he's seen in terms of us dropping off. There was an example, I think he was on the BT Sport or TNT Sports show with Rio Ferdinand in the week. Was it Between the Lines, that show they do where they and like they showed an example from our Shakhtar pre-season friendly where we went 1-0 up, and in the first half we just completely dropped off and let them kind of come on to us a little bit. And he basically said at half time, this is not our Tottenham. This is kind of the Tottenham of old. I don't want to be seeing this. And then literally in the second half, straight away, you saw they got the rocket up their arse, and you saw the kind of pressing patterns click into gear. And I think what the most frustrating thing was on Saturday was that we just didn't see that. We were just a bit too timid after I think we scored the first goal for some reason. And I think that's partly down to the fact that when you do lose key players, especially in midfield like Maddison, who's been so instrumental in dictating virtually every game so far for us this season, except from the Chelsea game when he was forced off early injured. He's had such a massive impact on every game and the way we've played throughout the season. So to lose a key man like that, you are going to look a little bit disjointed. And it wasn't so much even the lack of creativity. It was just everything just didn't feel quite right. It just didn't click. Because I said about it in the week, like with or without Maddison in this team, and this could come back to bite me, but this Tottenham team will score goals and create enough chances to win games. We've got quality in other areas, whether that's Pedro Porro. He has to kind of step up now as one of the biggest creators in this team, and he's done that throughout the season. Obviously, another assist on Saturday. But it just all felt a little bit disjointed and flat, and it was quite disappointing. But I think, sometimes you've got to, I think as Spurs fans, we've become very accustomed to just taking our medicine and moving on and kind of focusing on the next game, which unfortunately for us is an Aston Villa team who are banging form. And so it was a very interesting game. I thought Wolves deserved it completely, especially in the second half. I thought the first half was pretty even, poor-ish contest, but I think in the second half, although they didn't create too many clear-cut chances, I thought they kind of wrestled the grip of the game, really. I thought Lamina was unbelievable. He just, he for me is just one of the most, I was thinking about this earlier for a video, actually, like he's one of the most underrated players in the Premier League. And I could kind of, when we, obviously we'll get on to talk about Newcastle, but he, for me, fits that, and Wolves fans aren't going to like this, but he, for me, fits that Newcastle midfield so well. Like I can kind of just see it, the way he breaks up play. Wolves have been so good at that this season. And that's mainly been down to him in midfield. And I thought he was excellent and kind of, he deserved the winning goal, really, in my opinion. But yeah, the Wolves deserved it. It was just a poor day at the office from us, really.
And do you think, like, obviously you mentioned Maddison is missing, but also like a player like Van der Ven, who's come in and just so quickly slotted into the Premier League and looked incredible. Do you think like him missing and like Eric Dyer or Ben Davies having to come in? Do you think that's where the issue lies?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it as well. I was on a YouTube video earlier with James Alcott actually talking about this exact same thing, which is coming out later in the week, and basically saying how do you essentially replace that back line in Romero and Van de Ven? Obviously, we haven't really got to worry about Romero in the long term. We will again if he gets suspended again, but he'll be back after the Man City game. But Van de Ven, it's just that whether you're looking at January or whether you're looking at the players already in the squad, how do you replace someone like that? His kind of his stature and his physicality and his pace is just irreplaceable. There's not many, even if you dipped into the transfer market, especially in January, you're not going to go and find a player that can replicate what he does for Tottenham. He's so key. Him and Romero are so key, bringing the ball out from the back. And it's just, especially with the way that Tottenham's, obviously I think we missed a doggy massively on Saturday as well. He has been a revelation for Tottenham so far this season, and the way he's just effortlessly stepped into the role that I'm being honest, we didn't really know if he could do. Obviously, in terms of the Serie A, when you've got a vested interest in a young player like that, you're watching someone like Udogie and Udinese in particular quite closely because you want to see what he can do and you want to see what he's about. And we kind of were under this impression that he is a wing back, and that's why we brought him in. Paratici and Conte identified him to come and play in a very particular system. But one of the things we've seen about Ange Postecoglou so far is, and you look at Pedro Porro as well on the other side, is that we thought we kind of had these square pegs in round holes, but actually with a bit of good coaching and a bit of kind of empowerment from a coach that's as good as Postecoglou has shown that he can be, then you can fit these players into the system. But with the players that we are now left with, he's going to have to try and over the course of the next however many games Van de Ven's going to miss, whether that's could be at least the next 10. The time that Van de Ven, or the time frame of Van de Ven's injury isn't really the issue. Obviously, it's not ideal, but it's come at a time where the volume of games is just ridiculous. He's basically going to miss like nearly a third of the season, and like you said, he's been so crucial for us. And I think. I've always been quite a big fan of Eric Dyer because I feel like we recognise now that he's not up to it anymore. We all know that, but he's always given absolutely everything for Tottenham. You can't fault his character. You can't fault his application, his effort on the pitch. He's kind of been, more than many other players I've seen in recent years, especially at Tottenham, kind of been shoehorned into so many different roles, and he's kind of just had to adapt to it. And you don't just become a bad ball player and centre back overnight, but you could say he was potentially at fault for the first goal. We tried that ball down the line to Kulusevski that went out of play, and all of a sudden they take a quick throw. 10 seconds later, the ball's in the back of the net. But it's not as simple as that. For me, you'd rather take the hit in the short term, trying to carry on in the guise and philosophy of your manager than adapt for a game just to kind of try and get through this period and pick up as many results as you can, because this is a long-term thing for Postecoglou. We need to kind of bear that in mind, and we've got massively ahead of ourselves in terms of where we thought we were going to be, and this is just a bit of a reality check, and sometimes you just have to get on with it and adapt, and we just kind of take it from there. But I thought Ben Davies actually had a really strong game, especially in the second half. I think if we're going to, when Romero comes back, I think Davies is the one to partner him. Tottenham have got a couple of really talented centre-backs in our under-21 side at the moment. You've got Alfie Dorrington and Ashley Phillips, who a lot of people were clamouring for him to play because he was pulled out of our under-21 game of the week and was training with the first team. Obviously, we bought him from Blackburn in the summer. But for me, I don't think he's quite ready yet. And I think one of the hallmarks of a Postecoglou centre-back is your ability to defend the channels, because of how much Porro, and obviously we missed him on Saturday, but Udogie like to come inside. And if you get spun, especially like by an Aston Villa in our next game in a couple of weeks, with that pace they've got on the counter-attack, your centre-backs will want to sit on the halfway line, and they're going to have to defend like a fullback going the other way because of how narrow you want your fullbacks, basically midfielders to be. So, and obviously Eric Dyer doesn't have that recovery pace, but I think with Ben Davies, he's shown as a left-sided centre-back in a back three under Antonio Conte, and as a left-back for the majority of his career, that he can do that a little bit better. And I thought he was all right on Saturday, to be fair. I'm not so much worried about him. And obviously he's the Van de Ven replacement, but you can't really replace what Van de Ven has. You just have to adapt and try and do something different.
Yeah, no, I think that all makes perfect sense. But you
Yeah.
raised something there, and I was thinking about it as I was kind of walking home from work. With now, Ange, obviously, we love Ange on this show. He seems like a guy you'd love to go for a beer with, absolute hero, right? But I wanted to get your thoughts as well on, especially the game against Chelsea, where he stuck so rigidly to his philosophy. Whereas if he'd have maybe done what Klopp did against you when he went back to 9 men, maybe you could have got a result, because Chelsea still couldn't really score the chances they had, right?
Yeah.
How did you feel about like watching that he's so dogged with his philosophy? Like, do you want him to be a bit more pragmatic, or you're just like, no, mate, you do you?
Well, I think the way I see it at this current moment is I kind of want him to just carry on in his philosophy, because although that result on Monday was hard to take, because even with the high line and we let Chelsea have chances, the character and resilience that we did show to nearly go and grab an equaliser on 3 separate occasions with the disallowed goal, and then Bentancur should have scored that header really, and Son had a chance we went through on goal as well. For me, in this kind of week window that this has happened, I feel like the fallout of that game is still kind of happening now. It's kind of the longest fallout I can remember from a Spurs game for years, and we've had a lot of games where you can pick apart for various reasons. But for me, in the short term, it's about, you've got a young group of players, and what better way are you going to try and get them to buy into what you're doing by sticking to your principle in a moment of adversity like that? And I think that's exactly what he tried to do, because also he's future-proofed himself so well, Postecoglou. I remember I think it was after the Arsenal game actually, where we had that period in the first half where you could really tell that the likes of Van de Ven and Udogie especially were kind of struggling with that, playing out from the back and getting caught. And we could have easily been 2-0 down if Jesus had scored that chance. But things kind of clicked after that moment. And Postecoglou, Van de Ven talks about it after that game, and he said that you had Postecoglou on the sidelines just saying, keep playing. If it goes wrong, or if you fuck up, it's on me. I take the responsibility. And I think, again, he's done that so well in the Chelsea game, because he's had to bear the weight of a lot of criticism, being called naive, which I think the naive thing for me frustrates me a little bit, because I think that's kind of a label that he's been trying to shake off through his whole career, because of the fact that he's managed at so-called lesser clubs and kind of had a more of an unconventional route to the Premier League. And I think it's kind of, I think it could be perceived as a little bit patronising, but I understand why people are saying it in reference to that particular state in that game, because, you know, exactly like you said, Jurgen Klopp, as soon as they went down to 9 men, he took all of the front 3 off, basically, from what I can remember. They didn't really have an out ball, and they tried to sit in and make it as hard as possible. And you could tell that Tottenham got frustrated. I was at that game, and it was one of those things where I didn't think it was going to happen for us. We had a couple of really good chances at 1-1. I think before the second yellow, they were under the pump for the first 15 minutes of the second half. Alisson made a couple of really good saves from Son and Maddison, but as soon as they went to 9, they made it so difficult, and it really was heart in mouths kind of stuff, but in a funny way. Like we talked about, I think we were talking about before about Vicario, and the way that and I've seen a lot of people on Twitter saying, how is he getting so much praise after letting 4 goals? And it's like, well, if you look at it in the context of the game, he was an absolute hero. You know,
he made some incredible saves. He was he's a keeper that we've been talking about for a while, Adam, from Empoli. Like he was unreal.
Yeah.
He was incredible.
Yeah. He's been a revelation for us this season. And I think that it almost in a funny way, like at 3, when the third goal went in, because we'd had that kind of 5-minute period of the Son chance, the Bentancur chance, and the Dyer disallowed goal, they scored the third goal literally straight after that on the counter-attack. And I think because we'd come so close, there wasn't really this feeling of like, oh, well, like it was everyone in the ground was like, the chorus of like, oh, when the Spurs after Chelsea had just scored, it was like we were drowning out their away fans, and they just scored a goal. It was like I'd never experienced anything like it, really. And I think that's because Ange's bravery, in a way, and it's not something I've really seen been talked about. I think Ange's bravery has kind of allowed some of these players on the fringes, or not so much on the fringes in Vicario, but players who maybe haven't been getting as much of the spotlight to really get their moment. Like Højbjerg came on and did really, really well. Like if we hadn't have lost that game, if we'd have held out for a draw, his clearance off the line would have been heralded as this massive moment. Eric Dyer did really well coming off the bench, first minutes of football all season. And like I said, Vicario, you know, he was kind of getting there towards like cult hero status with some of his performances, and just the fact that he's been a really, really solid goalkeeper. But the thing that's impressed me the most about Vicario this season is his character. He's just like, he is an absolute. I'm kind of running out of words for him, to be honest. But like, he's impressed me so much, and I think that game and the way we were so brave and we let Chelsea have so many chances, and the fact that he had such a heroic performance despite letting in 4 goals kind of allowed the most important thing as a football fan you want is connection to your players, right?
Yeah.
And I think that game gave us even more of that and even more of a connection to Postecoglou, because when your backs are up against the wall as a club and you've kind of coming under fire from the media and saying, oh, Postecoglou was naive, Spurs should have just held out, Chelsea can't score against low blocks, blah, 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 blah. Like, you want your manager to come out with that kind of feeling of defiance, and that's exactly what we got. And it was almost, a kind of moral victory for us as a fan base in that sense, even though on the face of it, we got battered. Like, it was such a bizarre game. I don't think I've ever been to a game that had anything like that. Like, it was
there's 2 Chelsea games in a row that have been utterly mental, and we're going to get on to the next one, I think. But Adam, any Wolves fans listening are going to be like, hey, we won the bloody game. Can you talk about Wolves?
Yeah, exactly, right.
Gary O'Neill has been absolutely fantastic since he came in. Obviously, a lot of Wolves fans weren't really sure when he took the job. They now find themselves in 12th on 15 points. They are 9 points above the relegation zone. We kind of tipped them to struggle this year. This is another great performance from them, and he's getting the most out of them without players like Neto. Like, they're still missing a few players, but he's managing to get it done. Like, were you impressed with them again this week?
Yeah, massively. And it's not a slice of humble pie, I think, from us as a pod, really, because we did kind of not see this happening, to be honest. And they've been very unlucky.
We're having quite a few of them lately.
We are. It's fair to say.
I don't think many people
No, exactly. No, but you know what? Even the amount of decisions that have been given against them from referees, VAR, was it previous weekend against Sheffield United, against Fabio Silva?
No way, that
penalty.
was a pen.
Newcastle United previous weekend. Then we had the Man United incident at the beginning of the season. They've had so many injustices. I think also just during the course of it, they've just been unlucky. So the one thing that I did make a note of, though, and I think this is something that I wanted to ask Ben, but maybe for another time, is around the African nations that's coming up, because the core amount of players that are in that Wolves squad. So Lamina, you obviously mentioned, Ben, but you've got Ryan Out-Nouri as well on that right or left-hand side even. So he's going to be massive miss for them, because if you're thinking Neto's out, and I don't know what the extent is, but you would imagine that's at least a month and then rehab, etc. It's going to take him a while before he's back. So let's just say on the freak side, he is available for January. You still got that missing bit with Lamina, and I think that's a massive bit. And I was looking at their squad. I can't see anyone that's a like for like that can do the kind of same kind of pressing, but the same energy as well. Because Lamina, I remember back at Southampton, he was really good then. I thought he was really, like Ben's point, very underrated. We know what he could do at Juventus as well, Rory. He'd had that spell beforehand. So you know what? He's a good player. And there's a few clubs that I noted down, but I was going to say to Ben, I mean, Basuma, when he took him off for Lo Celso as well, was an interesting kind of piece, wasn't it? Because it's almost like he tried to go for the win because he knew 1-0 wasn't suitable. But then there was other elements that I saw. Højbjerg, for example, he has like a very Jekyll and Hyde performance where he has this amazing lazy run at one point, but it's for both of those goals. He kind of looks behind him. He knows the play's there, but lets him go. And it's just those little individual errors. You wonder, come say January when Basuma might be at the African nations, will that be a bit of a miss? Because I know Bentancur is still waiting to get his groove on, and I suppose, to your point, it's going to be hard to make some decisions and maybe some of those transfers that you want to. So how much of a miss will Papa Sarr and Basuma be for you guys?
Massive, I think. Just to touch on Wolves quickly, because I think they do deserve a lot of praise. I think Gary O'Neill has been a revelation for them, really. You know, there was a lot of, we'll get on to Bournemouth later on, but I think a lot of Bournemouth fans were very kind of, despite the fact that he kept him up, they weren't that sad to see him go. And I think he's done so well over the course of the last couple of months to deal with what he's had to deal with that squad. Players missing, fans being underwhelmed by the appointment on the eve of the season, basically. I think he was appointed the week before the start of the season, wasn't he? Like, it's just, and you saw it straight away with that first performance away at Man United, how much of a threat, especially in transition, they can be, especially when you've got players as physical as like Cunha and Lamina,
Yeah.
and someone who's got the skill and the pace of Neto. You know, you wouldn't have. My fear as a Spurs fan is that if Neto was playing, it could have been more, because they got on top of us in that second half, but they didn't really have the quality to kind of really make it count until Sarabia came on. He was incredible.
What a goal
he was,
as well, by the way.
What a goal. But you touched on it there with Højbjerg. Like, we've seen it so many times with Højbjerg, and I don't think, other than Richarlison, I don't think I've seen a player in either my life as a Spurs fan, or certainly in the last like 5 or 6 years, that has divided opinion in the fan base so much. Like you said, that's so true what you said. It was such a Jekyll and Hyde performance, because first half did really well, kind of breaking up play. Like you said, got us forward up the pitch really well. Second half, like that goal, he just, when you watch it back, the ball that comes over the top, Dyer is kind of side on and kind of just almost gets out of the way to let it go. But the way that Højbjerg he just basically just leaves it. It was just like,
he
sees
the player coming in, doesn't he?
It was unbelievable. And it was just like, I don't want to be, especially with everything that's going on at the moment, I find it really hard to kind of be overcritical of players and really over-analyze everything, because, you know, trying to remain positive and think about the bigger picture. But that was really poor when you watch it back. And I think, like you touched on, and how we got to this, or the question that you asked about Bissouma and Sarr, they're going to be massive misses, because Bentancur has come back, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of a lot of Spurs fans, way ahead of schedule in terms of what we thought. Apparently, he's been chomping at the bit for a long time now, to kind of knocking on the Ange's door, saying, give me a chance. But I'm not a doctor, but it just kind of feels like, with the severity of the injury, you want to be more
cautious, because it was an ACL, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. Yeah, and he's been out since early Feb. So you want to give him as much kind of, and he's playing for you. Well, he's been selected for Uruguay for the international break as well. So we'll see how many minutes he gets and how he holds up. Like, I've got no problem with Postecoglou bringing him off the bench in this period, because the only way he's going to get back up to match fitness is those, drip feeding him minutes here and there. But unfortunately, especially against Chelsea, we were kind of in a situation where we probably had to bring him on earlier than we wanted. And hopefully by January, when Bissouma and Sarr do jet off to AFCON, Bentancur is fully fit, because I made a video. It was actually after the North London derby, because Bissouma had an incredible performance in that game. And I made a video off the back of that saying, well, in 3 or 4 months' time, we're going to be in a situation where he's not going to be here for a month. And how do we replace him? And I think, and obviously you guys have watched a lot of Bentancur for Juventus and undoubtedly a lot of him for Tottenham. I think he's got all the qualities to be able to play in that number 6. So I think that's a way that you can do it. But then Maddison probably won't be back until mid-January. So the balance of the midfield is something that I think is Postecoglou's going to do really well to try and figure out over the next few months. I thought Lo Celso was good when he came on, actually. And I think Lo Celso is one of those players that has been misprofiled, I think, to an extent by a lot of Spurs fans since we signed him 4 years ago now. And I think there's a lot of frustration within the Spurs fan base, because we've not seen the best of him really over a 4-year period. He's been out on loan 2 or 3 times now. And I think everybody, because when he came in at a time where Eriksen was going the other way, or seemingly going out the door. He left to go to Inter in January. I think a lot of people thought he was this number 10 creative attacking midfield player, and he's not that. And I think you saw that in his kind of cameo off the bench on Saturday. He did really, really well, dropping deeper, breaking up the play, winning the ball back and trying to get Tottenham forward. And I think without Bissouma and Sarr, that's something that we're going to miss. And I think that January could be Lo Celso's kind of time to shine. But when you fast forward it to the next game, where Bissouma will be unavailable because of suspension, so we're kind of going to get to see a mini test case of what it could look like without him in the next game. It'll be interesting to see how he lines up. And I don't really know. I think Sarr's one of the ones that is interesting, because he seems to have gone under the radar, I think, for a lot of rival fans as well. Like, he's been exceptional for Tottenham this season. Like, he's been, kind of saw glimpses of it last season, but I think with Bissouma's brilliance in that midfield and the way that Maddison has arguably been, up until this weekend because of injury, the best player in the league so far this season. And I think it's kind of a good thing that he's gone under the radar, because you don't want him to become suddenly overhyped and, that level of expectation sets in. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how Postecoglou kind of deals with that midfield situation over the next few months, for sure.
Well, we shall see, and we're going to have to move on from the Spurs Wolves game. I apologise, but we are
I'm happy to move on after Saturday.
We'll take you away from the pain now, and we can move on, and we can look at even more fun at the Bridge as it was finished. Chelsea 4, Man City 4. I got my hopes up so many times that Man City were going to lose, but they never ever do. But Adam, you watched the game. Take us through that absolute bedlam. What were your main impressions coming out of that game? Can it be analysed, a game like that?
I don't know if you can, but it's full of madness, full of crazy moments. And I think it kind of was summed up by just individual errors, really. I think that was the kind of theme, really, that you saw two kind of teams going at it, and fair play to them for that kind of philosophy. I think Man City are probably the most gutted that they let those kind of leads slip away. I mean, thinking about the Sterling goal, for example, that makes it 2-1, for example, Gvardiol dwindles on the ball, and he's not been the most comfortable in that kind of left-hand side of that kind of trio or the back four as well, because I know what he's trying to achieve, because I saw it last season with Kanji being that kind of man, or Ake, for example. But yeah, Gvardiol doesn't seem as comfortable. I think he's more someone that's more centre-minded rather than being on the left side. But do you know what? It was such an amazing kind of game of entertainment, because there didn't seem to be kind of anyone that had moments, if that made sense, because I wouldn't say necessarily anyone kind of dominated that kind of midfield battle. I think it was more a case of a lot of individual players taking on their man. Like, for example, Phil Foden, I thought had an excellent game, as did Raheem Sterling as well. But I think obviously a lot of plaudits go to Cole Palmer, who I didn't think was going to be a great signing, but he's proving what a worth he is, in terms of he's demanding a lot more of his counterparts. You know, he's trying to demand the ball, and you could see he was opening up opportunities, had a shot, for example, prior to that penalty a moment as well. So he's really starting to sparkle, and I think the fact that he's been given that game time is kind of testament to Pochettino, who I know Ben will probably love that, but you know, he's a player or manager that gives time to these kind of players, right? He helps them develop. I think there was some interesting players like Enzo Fernandez that went really missing in this game. I mean, it's hard when you've got so much going on, and he wasn't really, I didn't even notice him. Let's put it that way. There was so much going on. It was so hard to really focus on it. But just in summary, I mean, it was a crazy game. Lots to be taken out of. I think positives for Chelsea is that they're starting to pick up some form now. I know obviously the catalyst was that Monday night game, I think, to an extent, but yeah, it proved that they're here now to kind of maybe disrupt it a bit more. And maybe it's about time that they've started to pick up that form, because Pochettino, I think, was a bit, you know, walking on eggshells at the moment.
It was getting close, wasn't it? But what they have done is turn up against the bigger sides, right? They their performance against Arsenal was one of the best performances they've put in this season. Against Spurs, against City now. So Ben, are you surprised at Poch, or were you expecting Poch to kind of turn it around? He's done it quite quickly considering how many players he's juggling.
Yeah, it's interesting with Poch, because as much as in the first few weeks of the season, it was kind of funny, bearing in mind how well Spurs were performing, and it was kind of like, well, you've gone and not left us. Obviously, we sacked Pochettino, which is kind of this weird kind of irony of all of the kind of noise around last week. But it was kind of funny to sort of look at us and then look and point at them and see what's going on over there. But it hasn't surprised me at all the way they've kind of grown under him, because we had a similar thing under Pochettino at the start the first season. We got to this sort of stage of the season, and there was talk of Poch being sacked in his first season, and it was only really Harry Kane coming in that sort of gave Tottenham and Pochettino that sort of shot in the arm they needed. But I think with Chelsea, the difference between that Tottenham team then in his first season and the Chelsea team now is obviously the money they've been able to spend and the quality of players they've been able to bring in and the quality that he's got at his disposal. But the performances for me have been there since the start. There's been a few really underwhelming, frustrating performances from a Chelsea point of view. I think of Forest at home where they lost, where they were really poor. Bournemouth away, they weren't great.
But Brentford like you said, game as well.
Brentford was really, it was very uninspiring, and they kind of got what they deserved in that aspect. But against the bigger teams, they've really, really shone. And it wasn't really a surprise to me they got something out of this game. Didn't think it was going to happen the way it did, but I don't think anyone could have seen that coming. I thought it was going to be entertaining, and I thought they were going to go for each other. But I think what we ended up with was, I don't know, like maybe I'm trying to think of the best Premier League game since, or that's been the best Premier League game since when? I don't like maybe since Liverpool Spurs last season. But even then, like that was just crazy. This was just a really high. I think it was interesting that you touched on Enzo Fernandez, because it was very rare, unless Chelsea are kind of, from my experience anyway, unless they're dominating the game, unless they're ahead in the game, which they haven't been in a lot of the games so far this season, that they would take him off. And the fact that he came off for, I can't remember who came on for him, but I think it was an attacking substitution when they were 3-2 down, I think it might have been. I can't remember exactly, but that surprised me. And I think it, just to your point, that he did kind of go missing. And I think that midfield battle, although there was some really there was some performances of real individual quality. I thought Bernardo Silva, as always, was outstanding. I thought Foden was outstanding as well. I thought Conor Gallagher was so good. I've been so impressed with Conor Gallagher this season. But collectively, in terms of like the both midfields as a group, it was bizarrely open. I thought Rodri, I thought he had a good game. And I thought there were moments where, again, individual moments where he would win the ball back and make it look so effortless. And the way he just gets the ball out of his feet and gives it, and just like makes everything look so simple for someone of his kind of his frame and everything like that. But he didn't really get control of the game as much as I thought they would. I thought there was a real period after they went 3-2 up where it looked like City were going to play them off the park between like the 50th and 60th minute. But again, it didn't really, they did, but they didn't capitalize on it. And I think you could say that, you know, Pep is so obsessed with control. And you could say that the decision he made in terms of the starting 11 to start Doku over Grealish worked, because it got them to the place where they were 3-2 up, and then Doku came off and Grealish came on. But I think Grealish from the start of that game gives you a little bit more of that control, especially in a big game away from home against a team that's going to press the life out of you, that Chelsea have done this season. Don't get me wrong, I love Jeremy Doku. I'm kind of obsessed with him.
But if you're looking at ball retention, it's definitely Jack Grealish, isn't it? And it's the fact that he constantly wins free kicks as well allows you to keep the ball in the opposition third and maintain that pressure. I think there is a point there about this. Like, it's not often we see Man City not like this open, just this wide open. And I think like for them to concede 4 goals, I don't know when the last time, I think it's the first time in Guardiola's management career he's conceded 4 goals. I think I heard that this week. So it's very incredibly rare for City to be this open. So have Chelsea shown that Man City are get-atable this season? Because I do feel like they're a bit more get-atable, if that's a word. Either of you is going to answer that and just opening it.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll just say, I think so. I think if they're going to persist with Gvardiol on that left-hand side, that's the exploitation there as well. I think, you know, you just got to run at him, it seems like, at this moment in time. And I've never felt like he was confident on the ball by himself. Like, obviously, Akanji seems a bit more comfortable when he's played on that side, but I think the other player that they're missing in that central core is Johnny Stones, really. I think he makes it a bit like what Ben's point around Rodri. He makes it a bit more seamless when he steps up as well. So, he's, you know, by having that kind of control, and I think that's possibly what they missed yesterday, was if Johnny Stones is there, then that kind of changes the dynamics of how they close off that kind of game, I feel, to an extent. Because even Kyle Walker, he's a pacey right back, but he struggled against the likes of Mudryk when he came on. I think that's the substitution you mentioned, Ben, because I couldn't work it out. It was Gusto or Mudryk, but I think it was Mudryk. I think it's Mudryk. And then he just seemed to struggle even in the first half. You know, he got done for Raheem Sterling when he scored that second as well. So strange game. But I think that is, as you would say, gettable, should we say?
100%.
Well, it's encouraging to see. Because it felt like the Death Star was just going to roll 12 points clear again, and the title race was going to be done. But there's hope for some of us yet. I think there were some individual errors more than a way of getting at City. I thought, maybe your Gvardiol point. I think the marking or the defending for the Thiago Silva corner was absolutely shocking. Like, nobody moved. Like, nobody noticed him. I know, like, he tried to hide behind Disasi as like this clever disguise, but no one seemed to see him coming.
Also, Kanji's goal as well. That was a weird one as well, because
Free
Kanji
header.
was.
Yeah,
I can't
free
remember
header.
who was supposed to be marking him, but he kind of just walks away and just headed it into the back of the net. So it was a really random one as well, to be fair.
That one also looked worse because of the fact that I think Robert Sanchez. It was such a weird goal in real time because it was like, what has Sanchez done? And then you watch it back and it looks like he actually slips as he tries to adjust. But the fact that Akanji was afforded that much room in the box, and I think you could tell because Chelsea were really getting on top of City at that point as well. It was kind of the first thing City had been able to get out of Chelsea in a while. It was a corner and it came out and worked its way into the box. You could tell. I remember the camera panning to Pochettino on the sideline after that goal went in, and he was furious because not because it was a soft goal to concede, but the fact that they'd really gained the upper hand in that first half. Chelsea were electric. Sterling was playing as a man with a point to prove, and I mean the fact that I could sort of understand his exclusion from the England squad in maybe the first couple of international breaks of the season, but it's getting that
it's a bit weird now.
A bit more personal, doesn't it?
He's just so like he's so electric, and he's just playing with like someone at the moment like a man possessed, and he was incredible. And I think, like you said, it was a game that was kind of summed up by individual moments of real quality, but also individual errors. And I think both teams will kind of look at that, and even Ruben Diaz for the penalty. Like he doesn't need to dive in like that. Broja did really well. He did. I think he did really well to kind of show that composure and sell Ruben Diaz a dummy, but. You know, Ruben Diaz gets talked about a lot as one of the best centre-backs in Europe, and rightly so. He's earned that kind of that tag for me. But that was a bit naive, I think, to just dive in like that. And I think it was just there was so much of that performance that was not so much maybe, but there was a lot of that performance that was characteristically City in the way they played. Some of the moves they put together were just amazing, and there were periods in the game where you just thought this is City at their best, but. A lot of it was very uncharacteristically City. And I think you made a really interesting point about John Stones. I think they missed him a lot. I noticed Akanji stepping up into midfield quite a lot in the absence of Stones. I think, especially in the first half, he did that quite well. But at the end of the day, John Stones is arguably the best. I don't know what you'd even call that position. Like
libero. Is he bringing back the libero back? I'm not sure what it is. Yeah.
Maybe.
He's an absolutely huge miss for them. But Akanji is a player that, for a kind of random signing from Borussia Dortmund, his impact has been insane. Like, genuinely, I'm surprised at how good he has been and consistent. Every time he plays, he seems to be just a 7, 8 out of 10 every single time. Like an incredible buy there from Pep, I think. But we're going to leave that one there, and we're going to go to. I enjoyed this one. Kieran Trippier arguing with Newcastle fans. They got spoiled quickly, didn't they? Arguing with Newcastle fans at the end of the game as it's not good enough. But Iraola, Adam, I'm going to go to you. Is Iraola kind of turning it round? They're putting a bit of form together. If it wasn't for Nick Pope, I think Bournemouth should have had about 5. It looks like they're starting to implement what he wants to do. And with players like Ouattara and Semenyo, I think they have got a bit of quality there.
Yeah, they're another side that I would identify as maybe watch out for them after or when the African Nations does take place, because they're another side that I think they are, like you say, Semenyo is another one that is at the African Nations potentially. So, they've got a few players. But to your point, Areola, obviously it's taken a long time. I think the style of football is interesting because obviously he's all about that kind of counterintuitive, making sure the press is quite high. And you can see it's taken a little while to develop. And I think to an extent where we've kind of labeled Vincent Kompany not being maybe savvy in terms of his press and his game. I think, Areola started to realize that he's got to manage it a bit more as well, sometimes against certain sides. But I think last few performances that Bournemouth have actually played, they've been quite promising on, in terms of attack and the balance of play as well. They've taken it 2 teams as well. I noticed a few games ago, I can't remember, I want to say it was Spurs actually. Spurs dominated the day, but I thought there was a few attacks that, it felt like, Bournemouth was starting to implement the style of play. And although they didn't really do much against Spurs on that particular day, I think it was 2-0. And I want to say Maddison's. It was when Maddison was having a few cheeky words with the fans. I think it was that day.
Yeah, that was that game.
Yeah, it just feels like it's starting to come together. Solanke actually is starting to prove he can be more of a prolific goal scorer as well, because I think he's very workmanlike, right? But I think that season in the Championships clearly rubbed off on him. He's starting to be a bit more productive in front of goal. And I think if he's not in the side, I think they struggle for goals personally. So, I mean, yeah, fair play. I think they're waiting till the kind of January transfer window to maybe make a few more businesses in that respect, because they need to pull themselves out of that kind of bottom four mix, don't they?
There's a long way to go.
They are dangerously in there, but if you think about the teams that are above them, they are starting to pull away a little bit. So they need to keep with the pack right now. But yeah, fair play to them. I think, like, to your point, they should have scored a lot more.
It was a really, really impressive performance from them. Like how they get the ball so quickly to the wings, like instantly their first ball is like, right, outride, run. And the pace and the like violence that they run forward with is like really impressive at times. If I compare that performance to when they played Arsenal, I watched them play Arsenal. I thought this team are absolutely doomed. Like they're one of the worst sides I've seen in a while. But that performance against Newcastle was incredible. But we do also have to say, and I'm going to go to you, Ben, is this down to the fact, is this midweek hangovers from Newcastle, a huge injury list that's racking up? Is this really what it is? Is it like squad depth was always going to catch up with them?
I think so. I think Newcastle have put in a lot of really encouraging performances despite all of that in recent weeks. So you kind of go back to the Arsenal game, although that was a strange game in many ways.
We don't talk about that one.
No, we've moved on from that one. But it's really interesting with Newcastle because I think you're right. I think the squad depth just isn't quite there. And they've been incredibly unlucky with injuries. They've got, I don't know how long exactly their injury list is, but it seems to be, it's all key players as well, right? Like you look at the team they put out on Saturday, that's not
Botman
a team
is out, and
Wilson, Isaac, there's a lot of, like, they've got a hell of a lot of players out injured. And, to be fair, so do Bournemouth as well. They've been unlucky with the likes of Tyler Adams out, who was a kind of a marquee signing for them in the summer in a way, but is basically out for the foreseeable future. But Newcastle, I think there's an element of, like you touched on as well, the European hangover. I'm not sure exactly the record, but it feels like most of the games they've now played after Champions League football, either the performance hasn't been there or the result certainly hasn't. And I think you're kind of seeing the same thing with Brighton as well, right? Brighton have not won in their last 6 games in the Premier League, and there's no coincidence that since they've kind of stepped into European football, it's had a knock-on effect, whether that's through injuries or whether that's just through players not being able to get through 2 games a week. And I think you're seeing that with both of those sides now. But Newcastle, it will come for them next season once they've adjusted to being back to playing 2 games a week after so long without doing that or being in Europe. I think the last time I remember them being in Europe was when it was Papi Cisse and Ben Arfa under Pardew, wasn't it? So I think Newcastle will be fine. I think, and also touching on the Trippier thing for a second, that's what really surprised me about that incident, was because I thought their fans, bearing in mind they've kind of been, you get the sense with the Newcastle fans that yes, they expect a level of performance, and yes, they expect to be challenging in certain areas now that they have this money and have had this investment. But most of them that I've come across, whether it's online or, I mean, I don't live anywhere. Like, I'd lived outside. I don't come up against many Geordies in real life, but you kind of get the sense that they are a bit like Spurs, where it's like, we can see we're going in the right direction, but at the same time, we're just kind of enjoying it and kind of riding that wave, which was why it was so surprising to see that altercation between Trippier and the fans. And I think, like you said, I think there's an element that might have got spoiled a little bit too quick. I just found it so bizarre, but I wouldn't be worried if I was a Newcastle fan. I think that's one of those results that, a bit like the Tottenham one we talked about earlier, that you kind of just have to take it on the chin and move on and accept the fact that Bournemouth were the much better team. It was Bournemouth's best performance of the season. I thought some of the football they played in that second half of the first half and carrying it into the second half was really, really good. Kind of the most, I think, again, with Bournemouth, like, other than a few select games that would have really worried me, like the Arsenal game where you went and, was it 4-0 you beat them there?
3-4. Yeah, 4-0, I think it was. Yeah.
Like, there's been a few alarm bells, but I think they'll be fine. And I think that's why, if I was Newcastle, yes, it doesn't look great if you go 2-0, go away to Bournemouth and get beaten the manner that they did, because, like you said, without Nick Pope, it really could have been 4 or 5. But I think you just have to file that one away as just you get on with it and move on. We had a lot of players missing. They were the better team, and that's why I just found the interaction with the Newcastle fans so weird.
Yeah, it really genuinely did surprise me. It didn't, but I feel like Newcastle fans have had a few complaints about how away tickets are getting allocated, and it's not necessarily to people who are like going to the most games. I think there's like some issues within the Newcastle away support. But great win for Bournemouth. Newcastle, I'm sure, as you said, will be fine. We're going to leave the Premier League there for now. I think elsewhere, the other results we had all the threes as Aston Villa make it 13 wins in a row at Villa Park, ready for Spurs' visit after the international break. They beat Fulham 3-1. West Ham beating Nottingham Forest 3-2. James Ward-Prowse taking all the headlines there. Some incredible set-piece deliveries. And Liverpool doing Brentford 3-0 with Salah, of course, getting 2. And Jota feels like he's not scored for a while. And Everton scoring 3 away to Crystal Palace as they look like they're having a surprisingly good season. Adam, a quick word on Everton?
Yeah, I don't know what they are anymore. They're just so inconsistent, aren't they? But all I can say is Eberechi Eze was so unlucky for the second decision on the penalties. That's all I'm going to say on this game, because that was horrendous.
Was not a dive. Eze is my mates get sick of me talking about Eze. He's my favourite player in the Premier League outside
You
Spurs.
are welcome on this pod anytime. I absolutely love the bloke.
The guilty pleasure starts.
He is just... he's unreal, and that was just such a weird one, because it wasn't going back quickly to the City-Chelsea game. Cucurella could have easily been sent off for a second yellow for diving in that second half. Doku got booked for diving where there was contact for me. Eze, I don't think it was enough for a penalty, maybe, but it certainly wasn't a dive. He gets clipped very lightly in a player like that who moves as quickly as he does, any touch and he's going to go down, the same as Doku, right? So that was just bizarre for me. But Everton, I kind of you just said it there, like, are they good? Are they actually,
might be good.
It's literally exactly what I said in, like, I did a video yesterday, or put it out this morning, about like my sort of 5 questions or 5 statements from the Premier League this weekend, and my second one was like, are Everton actually all right? Like, because it's weird, like I've been kind of weirdly rooting for Everton a little bit this season, because they've had a lot of stuff thrown their way in terms of the financial fair play stuff, and obviously that's kind of their own doing, but as their fan base don't really deserve that. They're just trying to support their team, and I think the players are giving them something to believe in, and they've gone away now and beaten West Ham away from home and beaten Palace away from home, and it's not the prettiest to watch all the time, but it's effective, and I think Sean Dyche is doing a really, really good job. I genuinely do.
No, I think, Everton fans will be absolutely delighted. And if there is a points deduction coming in at some point, you need to get those points clocked up as quickly as you can. Exactly. But yeah, we're going to leave the Premier League there, I think. And we're going to move to Serie A. Adam, where should we start with Serie A? Should we just get the Derby della Capitale out of the way?
If you want to, I'll let you kind of tell us how it was in 2 minutes. Go
on. There was a goal disallowed in the first half. There was a lot of fighting. Pedro nearly lost his head. Sarri got booked, and nothing else happened. It was very much 2 teams who were terrified of losing. I think the best thing was a Mourinho quote after the game about Pedro, where he said he'd be a fantastic swimmer because he's very good at diving. Just a classic dad joke just thrown in at the end there, which I really did enjoy.
It's classic Mourinho, that.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. He's absolutely box office. We love him being in Serie A. And I'm sure you're glad he's in Serie A now as well. But
nice to watch him from a distance, I think.
Completely. He's someone else's problem. But yeah, an absolutely terrible game. 2 teams that were afraid to actually risk anything. I thought if I had to pick a better team, I would say Roma, but marginally. I think they tried a little bit more than Lazio to try and kind of push it. But yeah, massively disappointed in the spectacle. And kind of for both teams, there was a lot on the line. Like if Roma win that, if Lazio lose that, then all of a sudden this bad season goes absolutely terrible.
Even worse,
and if Roma lose, any momentum that they've kind of started to build instantly falls away. So I think ultimately both teams would take a draw, I suppose, and that's what they kind of agreed to do. So we're going to leave that one there because there's no questions to be gleaned from that one. And we're going to go down to Lecce, I think, and we're going to talk about Milan 2, Lecce 2. It looked like Milan had got back to winning ways. It looked like they were getting the job done. Olivier Giroud, of course, scoring. But then they did their darndest to throw it away. And they did. They almost lost. But Adam, Reinders scored. He actually played pretty well.
He played well. Maybe he's found
For
his
a bit.
level, Rory, for a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I seem to remember after he scored that first one, then he has another chance where he should just square it, and he just shoots. And this is Reinders all over this season. He always does this like indecision making kind of thing, and it's really frustrating. So if I was a Milan fan, I'd be demanding he's off the pitch personally. He's just so frustrating because obviously he had that great season at AZ Alkmaar. But yeah, I mean, Milan, as you say, throw it away. And Lecce were, I think, fully deserved of 3 points. I mean, I don't know what your take is, Rory, for that third goal from Piccoli. And we'll go back a few steps because Sansone scores again. I saw this record. 7 times he scored against Milan for 4 different clubs. So he is just like a bad curse for them. But even Bamba as well on this good day, really good. So yeah, I mean, Lecce, we know about their credentials. For the beginning of this season, they've been, I suppose, overperforming. They shouldn't be in that top half at the beginning of the season. They've kind of fallen because of results naturally. But I think they're going to do really well again this season. I think they're pushing on from last season. And yeah, I mean, I still think that third goal should be given as a goal, personally.
Well, it was,
too.
and we were talking about it offline as well, weren't we, Ben? That, like, it was the softest foul going, and I think there should be a law that if a finish is of a certain quality, it should just be allowed regardless.
Just let it
that was a
stand.
hell of a goal.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was just like, it was because you still don't really know whether he gave it for the minor shirt pull or like a very, like, he's just sort of seemed to graze him and the Milan defender, I can't remember who it was, acted
Tomori,
as if
I think.
was it Tomori? Yeah, as if he'd trodden on him. It was like, nah, like, just, I think in football we should just create this like get up rule. It's like, if it's that like soft, just get up and just get on with it. Like, it's not, and also, you know, like you said, he took that goal so well, and it's just that I kind of think that just let it stand just for that, to be honest, really. But
it's just for the narrative. Come on, we need the narrative. We need the narrative. I'm sure there was some Milan fans that were going, "Go on, give it, and then we can finally get rid of Pioli. If we lose this, it's definitely gone." But yeah, it was a hell of a finish. I think Lecce, like as you said, Adam, last season they stayed up comfortably. Really, like they never really looked like they were going to go down. This year they've added a bit of quality. I thought Banda did look incredible. Strefezza has been a little bit quieter compared to last year, but he's still having a very good season. And they're just defensively, they're very, very solid. And Falcone is the next. We've kind of tipped him as the next Italian keeper to look out for because he's been fantastic for them last season and again this season. But yeah, for Milan, this is this their title credentials kind of done? They're now, oh my God, 8 points behind Inter, 6 points behind Juve. Do you think this is it, Adam?
I think it's it could be easy to dismiss them at this stage because I think obviously after the international break, you've got the big match, which is Juventus versus Inter. Obviously, if one of those sides takes the points, then you're potentially talking like maybe 9 points there. And I kind of mentioned this on our last live stream, I think it was, that Milan have to be really careful that they don't kind of step away from the title too at this moment in time because I was looking at the table earlier, Napoli being 10 points behind. I mean, it's looking like it's them two are going to run away with it at this moment in time. So Milan, if they're going to turn this around, they're going to need to get some results. They can't afford to lose games or throw away games like they did with Lecce. I mean, forget about the Napoli one, but this game they shouldn't have thrown away in the manner they did. But Giroud, obviously, he shouldn't be getting sent off for what he was doing. He was just petulant at that very moment. And I don't know if you saw that very much at Arsenal, Rory, but it seems like he's just getting generally wound up.
Talk about him at Arsenal. It gets me angry, honestly. I think Giroud has had an incredible career. He's won everything, but he will always be, to me, the reason we didn't win the league with Mesut Ozil because he went on that 20-game run of not scoring a goal or whatever it was. He's just incredibly streaky, and I'll never really forgive him for that. I think that, like, for a player who is so experienced and has been the experience head in that group and the kind of, the player they rely on, and for him to act like that at a key moment in the game, it just shows, I think, there's a bit of lack of discipline within the team. And again, that shows going 2-0 up and then like throwing it away shows a lack of discipline. I think there's like Pioli still needs to wrestle that changing room back under control, I think. And again, with a manager who constantly looks like he's about to be kicked out the door, it's hard for him to get that control, I imagine. And all the Milan fans I know here and in my Fanta Calcio group they've been sick of him for frigging ages now, and they're just like, right, we need either a really bad season so he goes, or can he just turn it around properly? Like, we need a big moment here, and I think Inter fans are loving it, of course, because since it's like, well, since the last international break, really, Milan have just dropped out of it completely. No wins in 4 now in Serie A. It's just not good enough. But yeah, Ben, your thoughts on Milan? You've seen him in Europe a little bit. Have you been impressed?
It's interesting, really. I was just about to say that because it's like the Milan PSG game in the last round of Champions League fixtures. I thought Milan were really impressive. I thought they were like, don't get me wrong, I think there was elements in the first half where on the break PSG looked really threatening with Mbappe and Dembele, but I think Milan deserved to win the game and played well. So to kind of see these sort of Jekyll and Hyde performances from them in Serie A where they're getting in control of games and then just throwing them away, kind of like you said, it kind of bleeds into that lack of discipline. And then Olivier Giroud is one of the most experienced players that's still currently playing in European football anywhere. And to kind of, especially after scoring the goal that puts them ahead, then to do that, it was very strange. It was very, very strange. And especially at a point in the game where, you know, Lecce were kind of, it felt like they were getting on top. It was just a bit of a petulant thing to do of someone of his experience. And I think Milan, it definitely feels like Inter and Juve are running away with it a bit now. And it's interesting because they've got each other after the international break, right? That's in the next round of fixtures. So it'd be interesting to see who out of those two kind of comes out on top and really establishes themselves as the true, obviously they're both contenders, but kind of the one that's going to, you know, try and run away with it if possible. And I think, like you said, Inter fans will be loving this. And I think that gap is definitely opening up already. And obviously Napoli seem to be far more, obviously from very much an outsider looking in, it feels like Napoli are the crisis team, but Napoli are only 2 points behind Milan. So it's just, it's kind of, that's what I love about the Serie A, like, especially as an outsider who kind of, with the Serie A, I do watch it casually, but it's kind of the league I like to go to the most outside of the Prem. So to kind of like check in and see what's going on, it always feels like there's one crisis club, and it just seems at the moment to be Napoli, but Milan are only
usually a few crisis clubs.
A
few on fire.
It's never
dull. Boring.
No,
yeah. That's why I love it. That's why it's great. It's so great. But yeah, Milan are a funny team, funny team, because they've got so many so much talent in that team. I think obviously you point to Rafael Leao as the obvious kind of standout, but yeah, it's just they just don't seem to be kind of fulfilling the potential that they do have.
Yeah, I think it might be. We'll see if Pioli lasts the season. It might be time for them to look elsewhere and see who else is on the market. But Stephen, as you've mentioned them, we're going to go over to Napoli before we go towards the title race, and we could be saying arrivederci to Rudy, as it looks like he is finally getting the P45. They're going to pay out his contract till the end of the season. And whilst Mazzari was linked, and we all got our hopes up for a valiant return of Walter Mazzari, it doesn't look like it's going to be. And it looks like Igor Tudor, the man who we said on this pod Juve should have appointed, it looks like he's going to come into Napoli, take the hot seat. A very exciting manager. I think he did relatively well at Marseille, considering how much of a basket case that club is and how well anybody can ever do at that club. But Adam, this performance from Napoli was absolutely shocking. It has to be the nail in the coffin.
Oh, 100%. He set them up for failure as well, because he had Kvaratskhelia on the bench. He had Piotr Zielinski on the bench. I mean, he was asking for it, wasn't he? I mean, it's bad enough there wasn't much creativity in that side. You know, Politano's there, and he's been very good. Obviously, Elmas he brought in because of his form recently. But to have Simeone and then Raspadori behind him, it felt like a really odd kind of blend of team. And you know, with Rudy Garcia, he likes to mix it up. So it's not necessarily the Napoli style of play. He likes to play a bit more direct. I mean, there's so many question marks with that kind of starting 11 to begin with. But you're thinking against an Empoli side that have really struggled this season, they should oversee them. And to be fair, we talked about players that have gone long droughts without games. I mean, that final goal scored by
What a
Victor
hit, by the way.
Kovalenko was incredible. If it wasn't for the Dimarco goal, that is the goal of the weekend, to be fair, because he's gone 46 games without a goal.
That's Mopai.
I mean, yeah, very much so. But what a hit. What an incredible hit. And moments before that, Kvaratskhelia has the kind of chance to break the deadlock and score for Napoli. But it was a fantastic back of the wall kind of stuff. Beresha in that goal for Napoli was incredible. But yeah, I mean, I didn't see this happening. We joked about this ever happening, but it has happened. Rudy Garcia is definitely going to get the sack now. I'm still a bit in the air around Tudor. I do like him as an individual. I still think they should go for Thiago Motta personally, but that's not De Laurentiis' style. He's not going to go and spend money if he knows there's a manager that's free, for example. So I think, look, best scenario, yes, he's probably better out of the two of Mazzari and Tudor.
You had to pick.
Yeah, I know. This is the thing. If he can do what he did at Hellas Verona, then it's a hell of a chance for Tudor to really get a chance at a big club. If he can win something, that will cement his chances going forward. And I'd love to see him in the Premier League personally, because he's a disciplinarian, but that likes to play the open style of football, because he likes to stick with a back three. And I think that might suit Napoli a bit better, especially defensively. They've been a bit poor this season. So, you know, Rachmani hasn't been the Rachmani of last season, but then you think about the squad that they've got, I think they're still in transition to an extent. And it'll be interesting, say, look, January, you've got the African nations, Osimhen will be out of the squad. So again, possibly that's why clubs didn't go for him this summer. Perhaps they're waiting for that kind of window to happen. But you suspect there will be some moves going on with Osimhen potentially. I mean, he doesn't look like he's comfortable, but it'll be interesting to see if a new manager is instilled. Will that kind of persuade him to stay? Because he loves Napoli. It's not about, obviously, Rudy Garcia right now. It's not about him now. So it's all about what happens next. And I think, they're going to have to build something now, and they have to give time for whoever's going to come in. But Tudor, I think he'll stabilize it and maybe push into like that top three mix. I think is kind of going to be the best case scenario, I think, at this stage. What about you, Rory, though?
Yeah, well, that Verona team that you had with Barak and Simeone, and it was one of, like, regular listeners will know, I loved that Verona team. They played such incredible football. They had such a great season. They just couldn't keep the gang together, unfortunately. But that was him coaching, and that was his football. That was like 3-5-2 or 3-4-3, and it was amazing to watch. And I think if he can get that at Napoli, obviously with Di Lorenzo being such a great wing back as well, I think there are players there that could really fit into that system very, very well. He could have Raspadori and Osimhen up front, which is frightening for anyone, I think, because both of those players on their day can be absolute killers. So I think, he could really come in and do a great job. So I'm excited to see it. And I think we've said it before, but when there was that awful Juve All or Nothing documentary, Igor Tudor was the only one who came out of that with any credit that looked like slightly that he knew what he was doing. So I think, exciting appointment for Napoli potentially. But for Empoli, that is a massive win. That's huge. Absolutely huge. They've looked doomed since the season started. That takes them out of the relegation zone, only by 1 point, but they're above Cagliari. So Empoli on 10 points, Cagliari on 9 points. So that's a huge, huge win and a great finish, as you said, from Kovalenko. But we do need to move on from Napoli and Empoli, and we're going to go towards the title race. Let's start with Juventus Cagliari. Now, Ben, have you been unlucky enough to witness any of Juventus?
I haven't watched many Juventus games this season, but from what I've heard, a lot of it's been, considering, the fact that they are the form side in the league at the moment, it's not been, from what I gather, the most entertaining, shall we say. I mean, just looking at the last 5 results, 2-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0 again, and then 2-1 against Cagliari. It's just, it feels like, from an outsider's perspective, it feels like, that feels like typical pragmatic Juventus, but it feels like there's something deeper than that going on. It's interesting, actually, because before we came on, it'd be interesting, obviously, kind of a separate point. Spurs have been linked with Samuel Ling Jr. for January. So it'd be as a separate note, it'd be kind of good to get your thoughts on like how well of a fit that could be and what you've thought of him. But with Juventus, yeah, from like I said, from an outsider, it kind of feels like, oh, it's that's what they do. They haven't been exactly the most exciting side in Serie A over the last like 5 or 6 years. It's just been pragmatic and about the results, and that seems to be what's happening. But what they scored 19 goals this season, which is 10 less than Inter, who seems to be flying at the moment. So yeah, I haven't, I'll definitely be tuning into the Juve Inter game. I'm very excited to see that after the international break. I think it's gonna be a cracker.
Yeah, that's going to be an absolute banger. But I think with Illing Jr., when I saw the link, I thought, okay, that makes sense. He's a player that now Allegri isn't very good at playing young players. He's not very good at giving opportunities to players. And when he does play them, regardless, he'll play them at centre back or wing back. He doesn't care what position you are. You're playing in defence. But when he has come on, he's had he scored a big goal for them in the Champions League last year, I want to say.
Yes.
He's a player that I know Juventus fans enjoy, and when he comes on, they're like, he gets them off their seat, if you know what I mean. He's an exciting player. So I think he's a player that I could definitely see doing well in the Prem, and especially with Spurs. When I saw that link, I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. That does kind of make sense. So I think it could be another clever buy from Spurs from Serie A. Like, Adam, how do you see it?
Yeah, much to your point. I think he's someone that gets you off your feet. He's quite technical on the ball. I think he's one of those kind of dribblers that likes to take on his man. Something different to the Juventus team in that respect, because they haven't got maybe necessarily a player that can take the man. There's probably exceptions with Kostic, maybe Rory and Chiesa, perhaps. But with that exception, I think he's genuinely quite mature on the ball as well. I think that's the other aspect, is he's aware of like players around him, knows when to play the ball right. I've not really seen him do many mistakes, Rory. I mean, from the brief time that I've seen him, like, he's been quite good. He's just really impressive. And I think it's interesting that Juventus might consider moving him on. I suspect it's more financial decision here than anything else, potentially. But I mean, if Spurs do manage to get him, I think that'll be a hell of a bargain. I'm surprised Ange hasn't gone into Celtic yet, but
I'm still waiting for one of the Japanese players to turn up, I'll be honest. But in typical Juventus fashion, it is the two centre-backs who score. Bremer and Regani get the goals.
The two form players as well.
Well, this is it. And Regani having a hell of a redemption season. Like, he was, when I bought him in Fantacalcio this year, everyone in the group looked at me and was like, Vero, really? Like, you're buying this guy? Like, fine, take him. I think I got him for like 1 million, but he is having an incredible season. I'm absolutely delighted for him. The goal wasn't the most beautiful. It kind of hit.
I was going to say, Rory, have you ever scored a frosted goal like that? I don't know about Ben, but I've never kind of used my pelvis to hip it into the goal. You saw Haaland's goal, but this was something.
I was going to say, there's been a couple of them this weekend, isn't there?
Yeah, some really random ones. But to Ben's point, I think he's probably seen it on TikTok, where you see, do not watch this content because it might be sensitive. That's what you should label with Juventus generally. Do not watch it unless you're really that desperate to watch football, which it isn't guaranteed with Allegri. But it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because Rory, into different style of football to Juventus, so contrast of styles, philosophies. It's going to be an open game, and both of these teams hate each other, so it's going to be bonkers in the stadium as well.
Absolutely box office. And last year there was so much like antagonism with like the racism towards the Lukaku.
Oh yeah, of course.
All the stuff that came out about that. Like, every time these teams face it, it's a proper war. So I think this is going to be, and Allegri is of course going to come with the most, like, the hardest definition of his football, and just 11 men behind the ball, and it's Inter's job to break them down. And I think we've talked in the past about how Inter do struggle against kind of low blocks and how it is a way to frustrate them, but I think they are getting better at it. And to seamlessly segue into the next match, I think a big reason for that is Çalhanoğlu, who scored the second goal in this game from the penalty spot. I was debating with an Inter friend of mine last week about Çalhanoğlu being top 5 midfielders in the world. I said he's not quite top 5, but I think he might be top 10. But the reason I say this is because Inter lost Brozovic last season, who was absolutely huge for that team, and we thought there's no way they could replace him. And what they've done is they've replaced him with Çalhanoğlu, and it honestly isn't a role I thought he could do. I didn't think he had that engine. I didn't think he necessarily had the defensive side as strongly as Brozovic
the discipline.
did. I honestly didn't think he had it, and it's been incredible to watch. Obviously, his attacking output has always been fairly decent, but he's now the top scoring Turkish player in Serie A history, and just another incredible performance from him, alongside Barella, who we always enjoy watching.
Yeah.
But Adam, your takeaways from this game? I thought Frosinone were decent, but Inter looked comfortable throughout.
Yeah, I kind of said it in my review. Frosinone were brave. You wouldn't say they were necessarily outplaced because they'd only just come up. I just think the quality that Inter have in terms of their first choice 11 is just far and above what Frosinone could offer. I mean, they had Sule, who we've liked for the last few games. Obviously, he has that bit of quality about him. But apart from that, they didn't really offer too much offensively, apart from when Inzaghi made the changes. Walid Chadira, your very own Bari striker,
he came so close.
It came so close at the San Siro, but I mean, it was a fantastic performance by Inter. The quality was just telling. Thuram was unlucky not to have scored initially, anyway, from the corner set piece. But Barella touches was audacious. I mean, he was just having a laugh. I'll be brutally honest. If there's a player that could take the piss, it's Barella. He's in that kind of form right now that you feel like he is one of the best around. And to your point, Çalhanoğlu, I've seen him flourish last season, and there was a kind of a very interesting interview about him and Aslani. And Aslani, the fact that he hasn't had a lot of game time, but apparently they're very buddy. They're like see each other as brothers. And he said, I don't care that Çalhanoğlu is in the team because I'm learning off him. I'm like, we're developing a good relationship. So you feel like that's kind of camaraderie that I think Inzaghi's instilled in Inter. But yeah, Thuram again, what a bargain. Free transfer, you know, for a player that was almost going to go to the cross city rivals Milan and then turn up at Inter and just be almost like, who's Lukaku now? Like, why were we bothering with trying to sign Lukaku now? But yeah, Lautaro looks like he was ready to score more goals as well. I mean, it is exciting and it's almost frightening as well to the same extent, because you're like, this team, I hope it doesn't kind of like dwindle and kind of fall off a cliff now. That's the worry, is keeping that momentum. Because we've talked about Lautaro in the past. Go on, Rory.
No, I think they're like by far the best team in Serie A this year. Like they are the best team. They've got the best squad. I think they have depth. We've talked about Inzaghi, how much he recycles and he uses all these substitutions, and he's managing the squad very well. And I think that is something that he's learned from past seasons. I think the strength they have in the football they're playing, they're by far the best team. But yeah, the only issue is, are they going to Inter it? Or they're called Pazza Inter, like crazy Inter for a reason, right? There's always that chance that it could all go wrong. But I think with players like Dimarco playing as well and hitting balls like that and flying in, you've got nothing to worry about, Ben. Like that has to be the goal of the weekend from across Europe, surely.
Yeah, 100%. That was just like, I think we were saying it before we came on, but I think more people just need to start doing that. Just like if you see the goalkeeper off his line, just hit it. And the fact that 100%. I think we saw the Kane one a few weeks ago, and the amount of times that I saw Harry Kane do that at Tottenham and fail to the point where it's just like, mate, come on, right? It's not going to happen. It happened once actually against Uwe in a preseason friendly. And I think he decided to try and take that into basically every league game after that. But the Dimarco one, he was like, the fact that he was on the run as well, to kind of have the poise to sort of just like see that from, and it's not even as if, excuse me, like you're in the center of the pitch and everything's kind of around you. It was like head down, running down the wing, and then just look up for a split second, see the keeper. And the way it just like, as soon as you left his boot, you just knew, because otherwise, why would he take it on? It was just like, it was an incredible goal. I've been really impressed with Inter over the last few years now. Inter have kind of always been that team for me in Serie A that I've really loved since I was a kid. And I think over the last couple of years, it's really been good to see them back at the top of Serie A. And this season, I think they've been really impressive. Like, you know, they just show, I think it kind of just shows Juventus that you can be pragmatic and stylistic. Like they've got players in, I think their midfield, especially after losing Brozovic, Çalhanoğlu has really stepped up. Like following him in the Bundesliga at Leverkusen and then coming over to the Serie A, like, you always just thought of him as that classic number 10. It kind of felt like he was coming through at Leverkusen at the same time as a lot of other number 10s in Europe. I think of like the likes of Eriksen, and it was when Ozil was kind of coming to his heyday at Arsenal as well. And he just felt like that one that was on the precipice of either coming to the Premier League or going somewhere else and really tearing it up. But to see, you look at his, like, I'm just looking here at his heat map from this season. He is everywhere, like absolutely everywhere, and he can do it all. 5 goals, winning the ball back. You know, it's just like he's a player that I've really liked for quite a long time, and I think it's really good to see him in the absence of someone like Brozovic alongside Barella to kind of turn into this really complete midfielder. Yeah, they've been very entertaining watch so far, Inter, and I think long may it continue.
Yeah, well, hopefully, and I think they could push far in the Champions League again this year. I don't think last year was a freak accident.
No, it wasn't a surprise to me last year at all.
I really think they could do it again. They came very, very close. I really, really wish that game had gone another way, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But I think they could really push again this year. So fantastic from them. As we did say, the Derby d'Italia is the game after the international break. But I think that is all the football we have to talk about really. Elsewhere, was there any other games? Udinese drew again. Shock. They got a draw against Atalanta. Fiorentina beating Bologna 2-1. Bonaventura, absolutely. What a goal. Absolutely tearing it up as well. Xerxes getting another goal as well. Quietly having a very good season. And Genoa beat Verona, and Sassuolo Salernitana was actually a bit of a banger.
That was a crazy game. Yeah, exactly.
Go on. No, go on, Adam. Sorry.
All I was going to say is the other game I wanted to call out was quickly Monza and Torino. 1-1 it finished. However, Colpani is the man that we have to keep an eye out on. Obviously, we've said for this season he's been incredible, but I think it'll be interesting to see if Spalletti decides to play him for the Italy national squad, because it sounds like there's a few injuries now going on. So I think he'd be a perfect outlet right now. A play on form, looks incredible, untouched in that respect. I think he'd be really good. And Duvan Zapata has a great game for Torino. I mean, he should have scored at least 3 goals in this game, Rory. So for it to end 1-1, there's some good saves by Di Gregorio and also Milinkovic-Savic in the Torino goal as well. So end-to-end game, despite the scoreline, it was very good game as well. So
Juric has kind of gotten a bit of hot water for complaining about them not getting the penalty at the end. I think there was a Stonewall penalty. It was a goal. It looked to me like it was a penalty, but he's come out and been quite Arteta about it, let's say.
Right.
And he's gotten a bit of hot water with Serie A. So he wasn't particularly happy about that. But guys, we are going to call it a day there, I think. That's the end of league football for a while. We're going to have to survive the barren winters of an international break. But Ben, thank you very much for coming on to the show. We've absolutely loved it. Not bad for a Spurs fan. If or when our listeners and viewers want to find your stuff, where can they find you online?
So on TikTok, Ben Talks Football, kind of just making daily Premier League, Spurs content, anything football, I'm talking about it over there. So that's the main place to come and find me. Hopefully a YouTube channel coming next year as well. So keep an eye out for that. But TikTok's the main place at the moment. But yeah, absolute pleasure to come on, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
Beautiful. We will be inviting you back. Don't worry. Maybe after the next North London derby. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. We'll be in touch. Nice.
Love to.
Beautiful.
Absolutely love to.
Well, guys, thanks for joining us. As always, hit the like and subscribe button down here. You can find us on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod, on Instagram at Anglo-Italian Pod, and on TikTok at Anglo-Italian Pod. Adam, anything to say before we go?
No, enjoy your international breaks, and we'll see you soon. And we've got a special episode lined up, haven't we, Rory?
We do have an interview. It's done. It's in the can. That is official. Yes, that will be with you next week at some point. Arrivederci, a dopo, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.